I was sitting in my warm office at Arctic Wolf Snowplow Services when my phone rang for what felt like the 100th time that morning, and I knew the blizzard hammering Rochester, Minnesota, was about to make me very rich and very exhausted. The meteorologists had been warning us for 3 days about this monster storm rolling in from Canada, and now it was here with a vengeance, dumping snow at a rate of 3 inches per hour with winds gusting up to 50 miles per hour. I owned the largest snow removal company in Olmsted County, employing 42 people during peak season, and every single one of them was out there right now fighting against Mother Nature's fury. My name is Blake Anderson, and I had built this company from nothing over the past 12 years. I started with a beat-up Ford pickup and a rusty plow blade I bought at an estate sale, doing residential driveways for $40 a pop while working full-time as an accountant. Now, I had a fleet of 23 vehicles, ranging from commercial-grade plow trucks to massive front-end loaders, and contracts with half the businesses and municipal buildings in the county. I still kept my accounting license active because understanding numbers was what separated successful businesses from failed ones, but Arctic Wolf was my pride and joy. The irony was not lost on me that I lived in the Riverside Meadows HOA community, where I had purchased my house 6 years ago specifically because it was close to my main equipment yard. The location was perfect for business, but the HOA itself had been a thorn in my side since day one. I kept my work vehicles at the commercial property 2 miles away, drove a normal pickup truck around the neighborhood, and generally kept to myself. I paid my dues on time, kept my lawn immaculate in the summer, and never caused problems. But apparently, that was not enough for some people. The president of the Riverside Meadows HOA was a woman named Patricia Cunningham, though everyone called her Patty behind her back, usually with an eye roll attached. She was 53 years old, had never worked a day in her life thanks to her dentist husband's income, and had made it her personal mission to enforce every single rule in our HOA covenant with the enthusiasm of a medieval inquisitor. Her shoulder-length blonde hair was always styled in that generic suburban mom cut, and she wore nothing but athleisure wear despite never actually exercising. She drove a white Mercedes SUV with a vanity plate that said "Ho Queen," which told you everything you needed to know about her personality. I had tangled with Patty exactly 4 times in the 6 years I lived there. First, she cited me for having my trash cans visible from the street on a non-collection day, even though it was literally collection day and the truck just had not reached my house yet. Second, she threatened to fine me because my house number was allegedly the wrong font, even though it was identical to 6 other houses on my street. Third, she sent me a nasty letter about my grass being a 1/4 inch too tall, which I proved was false by actually measuring it and sending her photos with a ruler. Fourth, she tried to ban me from parking my personal truck in my own driveway because she claimed it was a commercial vehicle, even though it was registered as personal and had no business logos on it. Each time, I had politely but firmly stood my ground, cited the actual HOA rules back to her, and she had backed down while clearly fuming. I got the distinct impression that Patty was not used to people challenging her, and she had marked me as some kind of troublemaker for having the audacity to know my rights. Now, as the blizzard raged outside and my phone kept ringing with desperate customers, I had no idea that my Cold War with Patty Cunningham was about to escalate into something that would change everything. The National Weather Service had upgraded the blizzard warning to an extreme level around 9 that morning. By noon, the governor had declared a state of emergency and was asking people to stay off the roads unless absolutely necessary. My crews were working in shifts, prioritizing emergency routes, hospital access roads, and our commercial contracts. We had the Mayo Clinic, 3 urgent care facilities, 4 nursing homes, and 2 fire stations under contract, and those took absolute priority. Residential customers had to wait unless they had medical emergencies. I was coordinating everything from my office, tracking each truck via GPS, rotating crews to prevent exhaustion, and fielding constant calls. My office manager, Sandra, was manning the main phone line while I handled dispatch. My lead foreman, Miguel, was out in one of our heavy trucks supervising the crews. We had worked together for 9 years, and I trusted him completely. Around 2 in the afternoon, my personal cell phone rang with a number I did not recognize. I almost did not answer it, but something made me pick up. "Blake Anderson," I said, wedging the phone between my shoulder and ear while typing on my computer. "This is Patricia Cunningham from the Riverside Meadows HOA." Her voice was sharp and imperious, like she was addressing a servant. "I need to discuss an urgent matter with you." I felt my jaw tighten. "I'm extremely busy right now, Patty. We're in the middle of a blizzard emergency." "It's Miss Cunningham, and yes, the blizzard is exactly what I'm calling about," she said. "As you know, the HOA has rules about snow removal from driveways and sidewalks. According to Section 12, Paragraph 4 of our covenant, all snow must be cleared within 24 hours of the end of precipitation." I pinched the bridge of my nose. "The snow is still actively falling, Patty. It's not going to stop until tonight according to the forecast, and it's Miss Cunningham, then it's Mr. Anderson." "I'm aware of that," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "However, I'm concerned about emergency access. As HOA president, I have a responsibility to ensure the safety of all residents. The county will plow the streets when they can," I said. "Everyone's driveways will get cleared when the storm passes. Right now, my company is focused on hospitals and emergency services." There was a pause. "Your company." I realized my mistake immediately. I had been so careful to keep my business separate from my home life, never mentioning what I did for work at HOA meetings or neighborhood gatherings. I valued my privacy and did not want people constantly asking for favors or special treatment. "I own Arctic Wolf Snowplow Services," I said, deciding there was no point in hiding it now. "We're the largest snow removal company in the county, and like I said, we're slammed right now with emergency contracts." Another pause, longer this time. I could practically hear the gears turning in her head. "Well," she said, her tone shifting slightly, "in that case, I'm sure you can spare one of your trucks to take care of the HOA board members' homes. We have 6 board members, including myself. It would be a gesture of good community spirit." I could not believe what I was hearing. "Patty, every single one of my trucks is assigned to emergency facilities or commercial contracts. I have hospitals waiting. I have nursing homes full of elderly people who need access for medical services. I'm not pulling anyone off those jobs to do personal favors." "This is not a personal favor," she snapped. "This is about HOA leadership being able to fulfill our duties to the community. How can I conduct HOA business if I'm snowed in? The same way everyone else is handling it," I said. "You wait for the storm to pass. This is going to be over by tonight. The county will have the main roads clear by tomorrow morning. Everyone's driveways will get done over the next day or 2. "That's unacceptable," she said, her voice rising. "As HOA president, I'm instructing you to send a truck to clear my driveway immediately. This is an emergency." I felt my temper flare. "Being snowed in during a blizzard is not an emergency, Patty. An emergency is a heart attack victim who cannot reach the hospital because the roads are not plowed. That's what my crews are dealing with right now. Don't you take that tone with me, she said. I could make things very difficult for you in this neighborhood. Perhaps it's time we reviewed whether your business vehicles have ever been parked on HOA property. Perhaps we need to do a thorough inspection of your property for violations. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay calm. Are you seriously threatening me right now because I won't give you special treatment during a natural disaster? I'm not threatening anyone, she said, though her voice said otherwise. I'm simply reminding you that HOA rules apply to everyone, and that includes you. Now, are you going to send a truck to my house or not? No, I said flatly. I'm not. My crews are handling actual emergencies. Your driveway is not one of them. Fine, she spat. Don't say I didn't give you a chance to do this the easy way. You're going to regret this, Mr. Anderson. She hung up before I could respond. I stared at my phone for a moment, shaking my head in disbelief. The entitlement was breathtaking. We were in the middle of one of the worst blizzards in years. My people were working around the clock to keep emergency services accessible, and she was demanding personal service like she was some kind of royalty. Sandra poked her head into my office. Everything okay? You look stressed. Just HOA nonsense, I said. Nothing that can't wait. How are we looking on the west side routes? We got back to work, and I pushed the conversation with Patty out of my mind. I had bigger things to worry about than a power-tripping HOA president. The blizzard continued to rage through the afternoon and into the evening. By 6 o'clock, we had received 29 inches of snow and counting. The temperature had dropped to 8 degrees Fahrenheit, with wind chills hitting -15. It was brutal, dangerous weather, and my crews were exhausted but pushing through. We had successfully kept all our emergency routes clear, and I was proud of every single person on my team. Around 7, I was getting ready to head out and spell one of my drivers when my phone rang again. Different number this time, but also local. Arctic Wolf Snowplow Services, this is Blake, I answered. Hi, yes, I'm calling from the Riverside Meadows HOA community, a woman's voice said. She sounded nervous. I'm trying to reach Blake Anderson. This is Blake, I said. What can I do for you? My name is Teresa Franklin. I'm on the HOA board secretary position. She lowered her voice. I'm calling to warn you about something. Patty, our president, she's been on a rampage all afternoon about you. I felt a knot form in my stomach. What kind of rampage? She's been calling an emergency board meeting, Teresa said. She wants to levy fines against you and possibly start eviction proceedings. She's claiming you're in violation of multiple HOA rules and that you refuse to provide emergency services to the community. Emergency services. I repeated. She wanted me to plow her personal driveway while my crews are keeping hospitals accessible. I know, Teresa said. I was on the call when she explained it to the board. Most of us think she's out of line, but you know how she can be. She's very persuasive, and she's twisting the story to make it sound like you refuse to help the HOA during a crisis. When is this meeting? I asked. Tomorrow night, 7 o'clock, assuming the storm is over and people can travel, she said. I'm not supposed to tell you because Patty wanted to surprise you with the fines as a done deal, but that's not right. You deserve a chance to defend yourself. I appreciated Teresa reaching out. She was a retired teacher, one of the reasonable people on the board, and we had always been cordial at neighborhood events. Thank you for letting me know, I said. I'll be there. Just be prepared, she warned. Patty's got quite a list of alleged violations. Some of them are really reaching, but she's determined. After we hung up, I sat back in my chair and tried to process this. Patty was actually going to try to fine me or evict me because I would not give her special treatment during a blizzard. The pettiness was stunning, but I also knew it could become a real problem. HOA boards had surprising amounts of power if left unchecked, and I had heard horror stories about people losing their homes over ridiculous disputes. I called my lawyer, David Morrison, who had handled the business incorporation and various contracts over the years. I got his voicemail and left a message explaining the situation, asking if he had experience with HOA disputes. The blizzard finally tapered off around 10 that night. Final snowfall total was 32 inches, making it the third largest snowstorm in Rochester's recorded history. The wind continued howling until nearly midnight, creating massive drifts that turned some areas into impassable mountains of snow. My crews worked through the night, catching naps in shifts while we kept the critical routes clear. I finally made it home around 4 in the morning, exhausted and sore. My own driveway was buried under 3 feet of snow with drifts that reached halfway up my garage door. I could have taken one of the trucks home and cleared it in 5 minutes, but I was too tired and honestly did not care. I parked on the street, grabbed my emergency kit from the truck bed, and trudged through the deep snow to my front door. It took me 15 minutes to dig out the entrance enough to get inside. I collapsed into bed without even taking off all my clothes, just my boots and coat, and was asleep in seconds. My phone woke me at 8:30. It was Miguel. "Boss, we've got a problem," he said. I groaned and rubbed my eyes. "What now?" "One of our trucks broke down on County Road 22, and we've got a lady here causing a scene," he said. "She's saying we're parked illegally and blocking HOA property, and she's threatening to have the truck towed." I was suddenly wide awake. "What lady?" "Says her name is Patricia Cunningham. Claims she's HOA president of some community." Of course it was. "I'll be right there." I threw on clean clothes, grabbed a protein bar and coffee, and headed out. I had to shovel a path from my front door to the street just to get to my truck, which took another 20 minutes. The roads were still treacherous despite the county's plowing efforts, and it took me 40 minutes to reach a drive that should have been 15. When I arrived, I found one of our medium-duty trucks sitting on the shoulder of County Road 22 with its hazard lights flashing. Miguel was standing next to it arguing with Patty, who had apparently driven her Mercedes through terrible road conditions just to harass my crew. A sheriff's deputy was also there, looking annoyed at having to deal with this. I parked behind the disabled truck and walked up. The temperature had dropped even further overnight, hitting 4 degrees, and the wind was still gusting hard enough to make it feel like -20. This was not weather you stood around arguing in unless you were incredibly petty or incredibly stupid. "Blake," Miguel said with obvious relief. "Thank God. This woman is insane." "Mr. Anderson," Patty said, turning to me with a triumphant expression. "Your vehicle is illegally parked on HOA property and constituting a hazard. I've asked the deputy to have it towed." I looked around, confused. "Patty, this is County Road 22. It's a public road. There's no HOA property here." "The shoulder extends into Riverside Meadows property," she insisted. "According to our plat maps, the HOA owns 5 feet from the edge of the pavement." The deputy, whose name tag read Morrison, no relation to my lawyer I assumed, shook his head. "Madam, I already explained to you that the county right-of-way extends 20 feet from the center line of the road in both directions. This vehicle is legally parked on county property with its hazards on because it's disabled. That's completely legal." "I'm telling you that's HOA property," Patty said stubbornly. "And I'm telling you that county right-of-way supersedes any HOA property claims," Deputy Morrison said, his patience clearly wearing thin. Now, unless you have actual evidence that this truck is blocking your personal property, I need you to move along so these men can fix their vehicle in peace." "This is outrageous," Patty said. "I'm going to file a complaint with the sheriff's department." "You're free to do that, madam," the deputy said. "The number is on our website. Now please return to your vehicle. It's dangerous to be standing out here in these conditions." Patty glared at me. "I'll see you tomorrow night at the board meeting. We're going to deal with you once and for all." She stalked back to her Mercedes, which she had parked half on the road in an actually dangerous position, and drove off without another word. "Sorry you had to deal with that," I said to the deputy. He shrugged. "Part of the job." Though I gotta say, that's one of the more ridiculous calls I've responded to. "Good luck with your HOA situation." After he left, I helped Miguel diagnose the truck problem. It was a failed alternator, which meant the battery had drained. We called for a service truck to come out with a replacement, and I sent Miguel home to get some rest while I waited with the disabled vehicle. While I sat there in my truck with the heat running, I checked my phone and found a message from my lawyer, David. He had gotten back to me with the name of a colleague who specialized in HOA law, a woman named Jennifer Hayes. I called her immediately and managed to reach her despite it being Saturday morning. I explained the situation, and she listened carefully before responding. "HOAs can be tricky," she said. "They do have the power to levy fines and even place liens on properties for covenant violations. However, they also have to follow proper procedures and can't act arbitrarily or vindictively. From what you're describing, this president is clearly targeting you out of personal spite, which could be argued as selective enforcement." "What should I do about this meeting tomorrow?" I asked. "Attend it, absolutely," she said. "Bring documentation of everything." "When did you last pay your HOA dues? When was your last violation notice before this incident? Do you have any communication with her that shows her demanding special treatment? Also, I'd recommend recording the meeting if Minnesota law allows it." "Minnesota is a one-party consent state for recording," I said, my accounting and business background coming in handy. "As long as one person in the conversation knows it's being recorded, it's legal." "Perfect," she said. "Record everything." Let her make her accusations, respond calmly and factually, and don't let her bait you into losing your temper. If she does try to levy fines or start eviction proceedings, I can help you fight it. Most HOA actions like this don't hold up if they're challenged properly, but most people don't challenge them because they don't know they can. We talked for another 20 minutes about strategy and what to expect. She agreed to be on standby in case I needed her to attend the meeting or send a legal letter. Her retainer was expensive, but I could afford it, and this was worth fighting properly. The service truck arrived around noon and we got the alternator replaced. I spent the rest of Saturday coordinating the massive cleanup effort across all our service areas. The phones were ringing nonstop with residential customers begging to be moved up the priority list. We had a systematic approach based on when contracts were signed and which tier of service people paid for, but everyone thought their situation was the most urgent. By the time I made it home Saturday evening, I was running on fumes. I took one of the smaller trucks and finally cleared my own driveway, which took about 10 minutes. As I was finishing, my neighbor from across the street, an elderly man named Robert, waved me down. "Blake, any chance you could do mine real quick?" he called. "I've got a doctor's appointment Monday morning and I'm worried about getting out." Robert was 84, a widower, and one of the nicest people in the neighborhood. "Of course," I said. "Give me 5 minutes." I cleared his driveway and sidewalk, refusing payment despite his insistence. It was the neighborly thing to do. As I was wrapping up, I noticed Patty watching from her window 3 houses down. Her driveway was still completely buried. I could have cleared it in 10 minutes, but given her behavior, there was no way I was doing her any favors now. Sunday was more of the same, grinding through the residential list. We worked from dawn until well after dark, clearing hundreds of driveways. My crews were making excellent overtime money, but everyone was exhausted. I made sure to rotate people through, giving everyone adequate breaks, and brought in pizza and coffee for the teams throughout the day. I spent Sunday evening preparing for the HOA meeting. I printed out my complete payment history showing 6 years of on-time dues payments. I documented every interaction I had ever had with Patty, including the dates and outcomes of all 4 previous disputes. I pulled up the HOA covenant and bylaws and highlighted the relevant sections about violations, fines, and due process. I made sure my phone was fully charged and tested the recording app. Monday morning, I woke up to find an official notice from the HOA taped to my front door. It listed 17 alleged violations, ranging from failure to provide community assistance during emergency, to disrespectful conduct toward HOA leadership, to bizarre claims like unapproved exterior lighting and lawn ornaments exceeding size restrictions, despite the fact that I had no lawn ornaments and my exterior lights were identical to everyone else's. It was clearly a kitchen sink approach, throwing everything at the wall to see what stuck. The notice demanded my appearance at the meeting at 7 that evening and stated that fines totaling $5,000 were being proposed, along with potential additional remedies, including property liens and eviction proceedings. I photographed the notice and emailed it to Jennifer Hayes, who called me back within 30 minutes. "This is actually helpful," she said. "This notice is so over the top and clearly retaliatory that it's going to be easy to argue selective enforcement and abuse of process. Half these violations are completely subjective or outright false. Still, attend the meeting, stick to the plan, and stay calm." The meeting was being held at the community clubhouse, a small building near the neighborhood entrance that was used for HOA gatherings and occasional resident events. I arrived at 6:50, wearing business casual clothes and carrying a folder with all my documentation. I started the recording app on my phone and put it in my shirt pocket where it would pick up audio clearly. The meeting room was set up with a long table at the front where the 6 board members sat, and rows of chairs facing them. There were about 20 other residents in attendance, which was unusual. Most HOA meetings drew maybe 5 people. Word had clearly spread that there was going to be drama. Patty sat in the center of the board table, wearing a black blazer that I assumed was meant to make her look authoritative. The other board members were Teresa Franklin, who had warned me about this, Donald Green, a retired engineer, Margaret Wu, who worked in hospital administration, Robert Patterson, a high school teacher, and Cynthia Larson, who was Patty's best friend and obvious ally. Patty called the meeting to order at 7 sharp and went through the standard opening procedures, reading the minutes from the last meeting and giving a treasurer's report. Then she got to what she called new business. "We have a serious matter to address tonight regarding a homeowner who has repeatedly violated HOA rules and demonstrated disrespect for community leadership," she began, looking directly at me. "Blake Anderson, please come forward." I stood and walked to the front, keeping my expression neutral. "Mr. Anderson, you have been issued a notice of violations listing 17 separate infractions of the Riverside Meadows HOA covenant," Patty said, reading from a paper in front of her. "These violations have occurred over an extended period, demonstrating a pattern of disregard for community standards. However, The most egregious and recent violation occurred during last week's blizzard, when you refused to provide emergency snow removal services to HOA leadership, despite owning a snow removal company and having the means to do so. There was murmuring from the other residents. I saw several people shaking their heads. Additionally, Patty continued, you spoke to me in a disrespectful and aggressive manner when I contacted you about this issue, and you have created a hostile environment within the community. The board is considering significant fines and potential eviction proceedings. Do you have anything to say in your defense? I took a breath and pulled out my folder. Yes, I do. First, regarding the blizzard incident, I did not refuse to provide emergency snow removal. I was managing a company-wide response to a natural disaster. Every single one of my trucks was assigned to hospitals, nursing homes, fire stations, and other genuine emergency facilities. My crews worked for 36 hours straight, keeping critical infrastructure accessible. I prioritized actual medical emergencies over personal convenience, which is what any responsible business owner would do. The HOA leadership's ability to function constitutes an emergency, Patty interjected. No, it does not, I said firmly. Being snowed in during a blizzard is inconvenient but not life-threatening. A heart attack patient who cannot reach the hospital is life-threatening. I made the correct ethical and professional decision. Teresa spoke up. I think Blake has a point, Patty. We were all snowed in. It was a blizzard. Expecting special treatment seems unreasonable. I wasn't asking for special treatment, Patty snapped. I was asking for community cooperation. You were asking for preferential service based on your position in the HOA, I said. That's the definition of special treatment. And when I declined, you threatened to make my life difficult in the neighborhood. I have that conversation recorded, by the way, as Minnesota is a one-party consent state. Several board members looked surprised. Patty's face flushed. You recorded a private conversation without my consent, she said, which is completely legal in Minnesota, I repeated. And given that you're now claiming I was disrespectful and aggressive, I'm glad I have the actual recording of what was said. Donald Green, the retired engineer, spoke up. I'd like to hear that recording. That's not necessary, Patty said quickly. Actually, I think it is, Margaret Wu said. If we're considering fines and eviction based on Blake's conduct during that conversation, we should hear what was actually said. I pulled out my phone and played the recording. The room was silent as everyone heard Patty demanding service, me explaining about the emergency contracts, and her threatening me with HOA violations and making my life difficult. When it finished, the silence was deafening. That doesn't sound like Blake was the aggressive one, Robert Patterson said quietly. Patty looked flustered. That recording is out of context. The point is, he refused to help the community. The point is, you demanded personal service during an emergency and threatened him when he prioritized hospitals over your driveway, Teresa said, her voice firm. That's not acceptable behavior for an HOA president. Let's move on to the other violations, Cynthia Larson said, clearly trying to help her friend. The notice lists 16 additional issues. Yes, let's discuss those, I said. I pulled out my documentation. I'm accused of having unapproved exterior lighting. I have the exact same lights as 8 other houses on my street, including yours, Patty. I have photos. I'm accused of having lawn ornaments exceeding size restrictions. I have no lawn ornaments. I'm accused of parking commercial vehicles in my driveway. My truck is registered as a personal vehicle and has no business markings. I'm accused of failing to maintain my lawn to community standards. I have photos showing my lawn is maintained identically to everyone else's, and I've only received one complaint about it in 6 years, which I proved was false by literally measuring the grass height. I went through each of the 17 violations methodically, providing photographic evidence, documentation, or logical rebuttals for every single one. Several of the board members were taking notes and looking increasingly uncomfortable. "This appears to be selective enforcement," Donald said, looking at Patty. "Blake's right that multiple other homes have the same exterior lights. I can see them from my house. Why is he being singled out?" "I'm not singling anyone out," Patty said defensively. "These are legitimate violations." "No, they're not," Margaret said. "I've reviewed the covenant, and most of these allegations are either false or apply equally to dozens of other homes. This looks like retaliation because Blake wouldn't plow your driveway." "That's ridiculous," Patty said, but her voice lacked conviction. Teresa Franklin looked at me. "Blake, do you have your dues payment history?" I handed over the printout showing 6 years of on-time payments, never late once. Teresa reviewed it and passed it to the other board members. "Blake has been a model resident in terms of following the rules and paying his dues," Teresa said. "He keeps to himself, maintains his property, and I've never heard of him causing any problems. This really does look like you're targeting him, Patty." "I am not targeting anyone," Patty said, her voice rising. "I'm doing my job as HOA president. If people would just cooperate and show proper respect for community leadership, we wouldn't have these problems." "Respect has to be earned," I said quietly. "You can't demand it just because you have a title, and you definitely can't abuse your position to settle personal grudges." "How dare you?" Patty said, standing up. "I have given 6 years of service to this community. I've worked tirelessly to maintain property values and community standards. And this is the thanks I get. Accusations and disrespect." "Patty, sit down," Donald said firmly. "This meeting is getting out of hand. I move that we table the violation notices against Blake Anderson pending a full review by an independent party. This matter is clearly too contentious for us to resolve tonight." "I second that motion," Margaret said immediately. "We can't table this," Patty protested. "We need to send a message that violations won't be tolerated." "The motion has been made and seconded," Robert Patterson said. "We need to vote. All in favor of tabling the violation notices pending independent review." Teresa, Donald, Margaret, and Robert all raised their hands. Only Patty and Cynthia voted against. "Motion passes 4-2, Robert said. "Blake, you won't face any fines or actions until this matter has been properly reviewed." "This is outrageous," Patty said. "You're all making a huge mistake." "What's outrageous is you trying to abuse your authority to punish someone for not giving you special treatment," Teresa said, her voice sharp. "I've been on this board for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this." Several residents in the audience started speaking up, agreeing with Teresa. One woman stood and pointed out that she had asked Patty for help with a drainage issue 3 months ago and never got a response. But apparently Patty had plenty of time to manufacture fake violations against someone she did not like. The meeting dissolved into chaos, with multiple people talking over each other. Patty tried to regain control but had clearly lost the room. After about 15 minutes of arguing, she abruptly declared the meeting adjourned and stormed out, with Cynthia hurrying after her. I stayed behind and thanked the board members who had stood up for me. Teresa gave me a tired smile. "She's not going to let this go," Teresa warned. "Patty doesn't handle losing well. Watch your back." I drove home feeling relieved but also concerned. I had won this round, but Teresa was right that Patty seemed like the type to escalate rather than back down. I had no idea how right that prediction would turn out to be. The next morning, Tuesday, I was back at work coordinating the continuing snow removal efforts. We were still working through the residential backlog, and it would probably take us another 2 days to finish everyone. The phone calls had slowed down, though, as people saw our trucks working through their neighborhoods and realized they would get serviced eventually. Around 10 in the morning, Sandra came into my office looking worried. "Blake, there's a guy here from the city building and safety department," she said. "He says he needs to inspect our facility." I frowned. "We just had our annual inspection 2 months ago. Everything was fine." "He says he received a complaint about unpermitted structures and potential safety violations," Sandra said. I felt my stomach sink. I went out to the main garage area where a middle-aged inspector was taking photos of everything. His name tag identified him as Carl Jenkins. "Can I help you?" I asked. He turned to me. "Are you the owner?" "Yes, Blake Anderson." "Mr. Anderson, I received a complaint yesterday that this facility has unpermitted structures and is not in compliance with commercial zoning requirements," he said. "I need to conduct a full inspection." "Who filed the complaint?" I asked, though I was pretty sure I already knew. He checked his clipboard. "Patricia Cunningham. She claims to be a concerned citizen reporting safety issues." Of course it was. "Inspector, we're fully permitted and licensed. We've been operating here for 12 years without any issues. Our last inspection was in November and we passed with 0 violations." "I understand, but I still need to verify that in response to the complaint," he said. "It won't take long if everything's in order." I cooperated fully, showing him all our permits, licenses, and the report from the November inspection. He spent 2 hours going through the entire facility, checking every building, every piece of equipment, and all our documentation. In the end, he found absolutely nothing wrong. "You're completely in compliance," he said, signing off on his report. "Whoever filed this complaint was either mistaken or wasting everyone's time." "It's the second one," I said. "This is harassment from someone with a personal grudge." He gave me a sympathetic look. "I can't do anything about that, but I'll note in my report that the complaint was unfounded. If this person files additional frivolous complaints, that pattern will be documented." After he left, I called Jennifer Hayes and told her what happened. "That's definitely harassment," she said. "And it's escalating. I recommend sending a formal cease and desist letter to this Patricia Cunningham. If she continues, you may have grounds for a lawsuit for harassment and abuse of process." "Let's do it," I said. I was done playing nice with Patty. Jennifer drafted a strongly worded letter and had it sent via certified mail that afternoon. It detailed Patty's pattern of harassment, the false HOA violations, the frivolous building and safety complaint, and demanded that she cease all retaliatory actions immediately or face legal consequences. Wednesday morning, I received a furious phone call from Patty. "How dare you send me threatening legal letters?" she screamed. "I'm going to sue you for harassment." "You're going to sue me for harassment," I said incredulously. "Patty, you filed fake HOA violations against me, called the county to inspect my business with false complaints, and threatened me repeatedly. I'm the one being harassed. I'm performing my duties as HOA president and as a concerned citizen," she said. "You're just trying to intimidate me into not doing my job. Your job is not to abuse your power to settle personal grudges," I said. "The letter stands. If you continue this harassment, I will sue you personally, and I will file complaints against you with the HOA board." "The board is on my side," she said. 4 out of 6 board members voted against you at the meeting," I pointed out. "You lost, Patty. Accept it and move on." She hung up on me again. That afternoon, I got a call from Teresa Franklin. "Blake, I wanted to give you a heads up," she said. Patty called an emergency board meeting for tomorrow night. She's trying to push through some kind of motion against you before the independent review happens. Can she do that? I asked. The board voted to table the matter. She's claiming this is a new issue, Teresa said. Something about you threatening her with lawsuits and creating a hostile environment. It's complete nonsense, but she's determined. Will the other board members support her? I asked. I don't think so, Teresa said. Donald, Margaret, Robert, and I are all pretty fed up with her behavior. But you should be there to defend yourself. I attended the emergency meeting Thursday night, recording everything again. Patty tried to argue that I was engaging in harassment by sending her legal letters and that the board needed to take immediate action to protect her as HOA president. It went nowhere. The other board members, except for Cynthia, were openly skeptical of her claims. Patty, Blake has a right to defend himself legally, Donald said. You filed complaints against him with the HOA and with the city. He's entitled to respond through his attorney. That's not harassment. He's trying to intimidate me, Patty insisted. No, he's not, Margaret said. You're the one who's been engaging in intimidation and retaliation. Honestly, I think we need to discuss whether you should continue as HOA president. That set off another round of chaos, with Patty screaming about betrayal and how she had given years of service to the community. Cynthia jumped to her defense, but she was the only one. The meeting ended with no action taken against me and with serious questions being raised about Patty's fitness for leadership. I thought that might be the end of it, that Patty would finally back down. I was very, very wrong. Friday morning, I woke up to discover that someone had vandalized my property during the night. My mailbox had been smashed. My front windows were covered in eggs that had frozen solid in the cold, and someone had spray-painted HOA Rules Matter across my garage door in red paint. I immediately called the police. A deputy arrived within 30 minutes and took a report, photographing all the damage. I mentioned the ongoing dispute with Patty and the HOA, and the deputy noted it in his report, though he was careful to say they could not make accusations without evidence. Do you have any security cameras? He asked. No, I said. I never thought I needed them in this neighborhood. You might want to consider installing some, he suggested. I called a security company that afternoon and had a full camera system installed by Monday, covering all angles of my property with night vision capabilities and cloud storage. The installation cost me $3,000, but it was worth it for the peace of mind. The weekend passed without incident. My crews finished the last of the residential snow removal, and things at work finally returned to a more normal pace. I was exhausted from 2 weeks of crisis management and ready for things to calm down. Monday afternoon, I received a certified letter from a law firm I did not recognize. Inside was a lawsuit from Patricia Cunningham claiming that I had slandered her reputation, harassed her, and caused her emotional distress. She was suing me for $50,000 in damages. I forwarded everything to Jennifer Hayes, who called me back sounding angry. This is a slap suit, she said. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's a frivolous lawsuit designed to intimidate you into silence through expensive legal fees. The good news is that Minnesota has strong anti-slap laws. We can get this dismissed and potentially recover your legal fees from her. How long will that take? I asked. Probably a few months, she said. But in the meantime, you need to keep documenting everything. If she continues harassing you, it'll only help our case. Sure enough, the harassment continued. Over the next 2 weeks, I received multiple notices from various city departments responding to complaints Patty had filed about my business. Fire marshal inspection for alleged safety violations. environmental health inspection for supposed hazardous materials, zoning enforcement investigation for claimed violations of operating hours. Every single inspection found no violations, but each one cost me time and money dealing with it. My home also received continued vandalism. More eggs, toilet paper in my trees, trash scattered across my lawn. My security cameras caught someone doing it one night, but the person was wearing a ski mask and heavy coat, making identification impossible. The vehicle was a dark sedan with no visible plates. I provided all the footage to the police, who said they would investigate but could not make any arrests without being able to identify the perpetrator. I strongly suspected it was Patty or someone she had enlisted, but I had no proof. The stress was getting to me. I was sleeping poorly, constantly on edge and spending more time dealing with HOA drama than running my business. But I refused to back down or move out, which was clearly what Patty wanted. In late February, the independent review of the HOA violations was completed by a lawyer who specialized in HOA disputes. His 20-page report concluded that all 17 violations were either false, unsupported by evidence, or examples of selective enforcement. He found clear evidence of retaliatory action by the HOA president and recommended that all violations be dismissed and that the board consider removing Patricia Cunningham from her position for abuse of authority. The report was presented at the March HOA board meeting. I attended, along with about 40 other residents who had heard about the situation and wanted to see how it played out. The meeting was packed, standing room only. The independent reviewer, a lawyer named Thomas Miller, presented his findings in detail. He was thorough, professional, and damning in his assessment of Patty's conduct. It is clear from the evidence that Mr. Anderson was targeted for retaliatory action following a personal dispute with the HOA president, he concluded. The violations filed against him were pretextual and would not have been filed against any other resident. This represents an abuse of the HOA president's authority and creates significant liability for the HOA as an organization. I recommend immediate dismissal of all violations and appropriate action regarding the HOA president's conduct. The room was silent when he finished. Patty sat at the board table looking like she had been slapped. Her face was red, and her hands were clenched into fists. Donald Green spoke first. I move that we accept the independent reviewer's recommendations in full. All violations against Blake Anderson are dismissed, and we open proceedings to remove Patricia Cunningham as HOA president for cause. I second, Margaret Wu said immediately. You can't do this, Patty said, her voice shaking. I've done nothing wrong. I've served this community faithfully for years. You've abused your authority and exposed the HOA to potential legal liability, Robert Patterson said. This is serious, Patty. You can't use your position to settle personal grudges. All in favor of the motion, Teresa Franklin said, taking over as acting chair. Donald, Margaret, Robert, and Teresa all raised their hands. Cynthia abstained. Patty obviously voted against, but she was the only one. Motion passes 4-1 with one abstention, Teresa said. Patty, you are removed as HOA president effective immediately. A special election will be held next month for the position. This is illegal, Patty shouted, standing up. You can't remove me without a vote of the full membership. Actually, according to the bylaws, the board can remove an officer for cause with a 2/3 vote, Thomas Miller said. You had 4 out of 6 voting members support the motion, which exceeds the 2/3 threshold. Patty looked around the room wildly, as if expecting someone to come to her defense. No one did. The residents who had packed the meeting were either nodding in agreement or looking at her with expressions ranging from pity to disgust. "Fine," she said, grabbing her purse. "This community deserves whatever happens without my leadership. You'll all regret this." She stormed out, and this time no one followed her. Even Cynthia stayed in her seat, looking uncomfortable but not willing to fall on her sword for her friend. The meeting continued with Teresa being voted in as temporary president until the special election. One of the first motions passed was a formal apology to me for the HOA's conduct and a commitment to pay my legal fees related to defending against the false violations. After the meeting, dozens of residents came up to me to apologize and express support. Many of them had their own stories of Patty's petty tyranny over the years, but had been too intimidated to speak up. Now that she was gone, people felt safe talking about it. I went home that night feeling like a massive weight had been lifted. It was not completely over. I still had the lawsuit to deal with, but the main source of harassment was gone. Jennifer Hayes filed a motion to dismiss Patty's lawsuit under Minnesota's anti-SLAPP statute in early March. She included extensive documentation of Patty's harassment, the independent review findings, and her removal from the HOA board as evidence that the lawsuit was retaliatory and frivolous. The hearing was held in Olmsted County District Court in mid-April before Judge Michael Reynolds. Jennifer presented our case methodically, walking through the timeline of events and demonstrating clearly that Patty had filed the lawsuit purely to retaliate against me for not giving her special treatment and for defending myself against her harassment. Patty's lawyer, a young attorney who looked extremely uncomfortable, tried to argue that his client had legitimate concerns about slander and emotional distress. Judge Reynolds was not buying it. "Counselor, I've reviewed the evidence and it's clear that your client engaged in a pattern of harassment and abuse of authority," the judge said. "Mr. Anderson's actions were defensive and appropriate. There's no basis for a claim of slander or harassment. In fact, the record suggests your client is the one who engaged in actionable harassment." He granted our motion to dismiss and ordered Patty to pay my legal fees, which had reached nearly $15,000. He also warned her lawyer that filing frivolous suits could result in sanctions. I thought that would finally be the end of it. Patty had lost at every turn, been removed from her HOA position, had her lawsuit dismissed, and been ordered to pay my legal fees. Any reasonable person would cut their losses and move on, but as I had learned, Patty was not a reasonable person. In early May, I was at my office when I got a call from one of my neighbors, Robert, the elderly man whose driveway I had cleared during the blizzard. "Blake, you need to get home right now," he said, his voice urgent. "There's a fire at your house." My heart stopped. I ran to my truck and drove home as fast as I dared, seeing smoke in the distance as I approached my neighborhood. Fire trucks were already there, and flames were visible coming from my attached garage. The firefighters had it under control by the time I arrived, but the garage was a total loss. My truck that had been parked inside was destroyed, along with all my tools, sporting equipment, and everything else I stored there. The house itself had smoke and water damage but was structurally intact. The fire marshal investigated and determined that the fire had been deliberately set. Someone had poured accelerant along the base of the garage door and ignited it. It was clearly arson. The police opened a criminal investigation immediately. I told them about the ongoing harassment from Patty and showed them all my documentation and security footage from the previous incidents. They were very interested. 2 days later, the police arrested Patricia Cunningham and charged her with first-degree arson. My security cameras had captured footage of her car driving slowly past my house around 3 in the morning, the night of the fire, which gave the police probable cause for a search warrant. They found a gas can in her garage that tested positive for the same accelerant used in the fire, and her phone's GPS data placed her in my neighborhood at the time the fire was set. Patty denied everything, claiming she was being framed, but the evidence was overwhelming. The prosecutor charged her with first-degree arson, which carried a potential sentence of up to 20 years in prison in Minnesota. The arrest made the local news. "Former HOA president arrested for arson" was the headline, and the story detailed the entire saga of harassment and retaliation. My phone rang off the hook with reporters wanting interviews, but Jennifer advised me to decline comment while the criminal case was pending. The community reaction was intense. Many residents were shocked that someone they had lived near for years could do something so dangerous and criminal. Others said they were not surprised, that they had always known Patty was unbalanced. The HOA board released a statement condemning her actions and expressing support for me. Cynthia Larson, Patty's friend and ally on the board, resigned her position immediately, apparently unable to face the shame of having supported someone who turned out to be an arsonist. Patty's husband, the dentist, filed for divorce within a week of her arrest. I almost felt bad for him. He apparently had no idea what his wife had been doing and was horrified when the truth came out. The criminal case moved slowly through the system. Patty's lawyer tried to negotiate a plea deal, but the prosecutor was not interested in being lenient. First-degree arson was a serious crime, and the fact that it was connected to a pattern of harassment and retaliation made it worse. In September, nearly 8 months after the blizzard that started everything, Patricia Cunningham went to trial. I testified about the entire sequence of events, from the initial phone call demanding snow removal to the various acts of harassment and vandalism. The prosecution presented the physical evidence, the security footage, and testimony from fire investigators and police. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours before returning a guilty verdict on all counts. Patty showed no emotion when the verdict was read, just staring straight ahead like she could not believe this was happening to her. At sentencing in October, the judge gave her 8 years in prison, noting that her actions had put lives at risk and that she had shown no remorse or acceptance of responsibility. She was also ordered to pay full restitution for the damage to my property, which totaled over $80,000 between the garage, the truck, and all the contents. I attended the sentencing hearing and watched as Patty was led away in handcuffs. I felt no satisfaction or triumph, just a sense of exhaustion and relief that it was finally over. The HOA held its special election in November, nearly a year after the blizzard. Teresa Franklin ran for president and won easily. One of her first acts was to pass new bylaws limiting the president's authority and establishing clear procedures for handling violations and disputes to prevent any future abuse of power. I was asked to serve on a committee to review and update all the HOA rules and procedures. I agreed, figuring I had earned the right to have input after everything I had been through. We spent 3 months modernizing the covenant, removing outdated and petty rules, and establishing fair enforcement mechanisms. My insurance covered most of the fire damage, though I was still out of pocket about $15,000 after the deductible and replacement costs for things that were not covered. I rebuilt the garage better than before, with improved fire suppression systems and reinforced construction. Arctic Wolf snowplow services continued to thrive. We had another busy winter in 2026, though thankfully without any blizzards quite as intense as that one in January 2025. My reputation in the community actually improved after the story got out. People respected that I had stood up to bullying and harassment and refused to back down. I even got a few new commercial contracts from business owners who said they wanted to work with someone who had proven integrity and did not play favorites. The company grew by about 20% over the following year. As for Patty, she would be eligible for parole after serving 2/3 of her sentence, which meant about 5.5 years. I did not plan to oppose her parole when the time came. I was not vindictive, and I believed in second chances, but I also knew she would never be welcome back in Riverside Meadows. Her house went into foreclosure and was sold at auction. The new owners were a lovely young couple with twin babies who became great neighbors. Looking back on the whole situation, I was amazed at how a simple refusal to plow someone's driveway during a blizzard had escalated into arson charges and prison time. It was a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked authority, petty tyranny, and refusing to accept accountability for your actions. But it was also a reminder that standing up for yourself was important, even when it was difficult and stressful. If I had just given in to Patty's demands from the beginning, it would have set a terrible precedent. She would have learned that threats and intimidation worked, and she would have continued abusing her power over me and probably others as well. By refusing to back down and documenting everything carefully, I had not only protected myself, but had exposed a serious problem in the HOA governance that needed to be addressed. The new rules and procedures we put in place would protect future residents from similar abuse. I also learned the value of having good people around you. Teresa Franklin and the other board members who stood up for what was right. My lawyer Jennifer Hayes, who gave me excellent advice and representation. My employees who kept the business running smoothly while I dealt with all this drama. My neighbors like Robert who supported me throughout. They all made a difference. On the anniversary of that blizzard, January 2026, we got hit with another significant snowstorm. Not quite as bad as the previous year, but still a solid 20 inches. My crews mobilized just like before, prioritizing emergency facilities and working around the clock to keep critical infrastructure accessible. This time, nobody from the HOA called demanding special treatment. In fact, Teresa Franklin sent out a community email thanking everyone for their patience, and specifically mentioning that I and my company were working to keep the hospitals and nursing homes accessible, which was where the priority needed to be. When I finally made it home after 2 days of continuous work, exhausted and sore, I found that several of my neighbors had gotten together and shoveled my driveway and front walk for me. There was a note stuck to my door that said, "Thanks for taking care of the community. We've got your back." I stood there in the cold, reading that note, and felt genuinely moved. This was what a community was supposed to be. People helping each other, looking out for one another, treating each other with basic respect and decency. Not petty power games and vindictive harassment. I had bought my house in Riverside Meadows 6 years ago because of its convenient location near my business. I had stayed because I refused to be driven out by a bully. But now, standing there with that note in my hand, I realized that this place had become a real home. Not because of the HOA or any rules or covenants, but because of the good people who lived here and who had shown me kindness and support when I needed it. The saga of Patricia Cunningham and the HOA from hell had tested me in ways I never expected. It had cost me time, money, stress, and nearly my entire garage. But it had also shown me what I was capable of when pushed, revealed who my real friends and allies were, and ultimately made my community stronger by forcing necessary reforms. As I walked into my house that evening, tired but content, I thought about how strange life could be. One phone call during a blizzard, one simple refusal to give preferential treatment, had set off a chain of events that ended with criminal charges and prison time. It could have gone so differently at multiple points along the way. If I had just agreed to plow Patty's driveway, none of this would have happened. But I also would have compromised my principles and enabled her abuse of power. If I had not documented everything and sought legal advice, I might have been successfully intimidated into moving. If the other HOA board members had not stood up for what was right, Patty might have gotten away with her harassment. Instead, justice had been served, reforms had been implemented, and the community was better for it. It was not the outcome anyone would have predicted when I answered that phone call on a snowy January morning, but it was the right one. I made myself dinner, took a long hot shower, and went to bed early. Tomorrow would bring more snow to clear, more customers to serve, more challenges to face. But I would handle them the same way I had handled everything else, with integrity, documentation, and the support of good people around me. The blizzard of January 2025 would go down in Rochester history books as one of the most significant snowstorms on record. For me, it would always be remembered as the day I learned that doing the right thing, even when it was difficult, was always worth it in the end. And that sometimes, the person demanding you shovel their driveway during a blizzard turns out to be the person who needs to learn that actions have consequences. Life in Riverside Meadows continued on peacefully after that. The HOA functioned properly under Teresa's leadership and the new governance rules. I continued running Arctic Wolf snowplow services successfully. And whenever it snowed, I made sure hospitals and nursing homes got cleared first, just like always, because that was the right thing to do. Some people never learned that lesson. Patricia Cunningham certainly never did, at least not before she ended up in prison. But I like to think that maybe, during her time behind bars, she would have the opportunity to reflect on how her need for control and special treatment had destroyed her life. Maybe she would come out a better person, though I was not holding my breath. As for me, I learned that sometimes the worst experiences lead to the best outcomes. I had a stronger company, a better community, good friends, and the satisfaction of knowing I had stood up for what was right even when it would have been easier to give in. That was worth more than any amount of money or any number of cleared driveways. The story of the HOA Karen who demanded I shovel her driveway during a blizzard, not knowing I owned the Plow company, had become something of a legend in Rochester. People brought it up at business networking events, neighborhood gatherings, and even in online forums discussing HOA horror stories. I usually just smiled and confirmed that yes, it really happened, and yes, it turned out exactly how you heard. Because sometimes, just sometimes, the good guy actually wins. The bully faces consequences, justice prevails, and the person who refused to compromise their principles gets vindicated in the end. It did not always work out that way, I knew that. But this time it did, and that made all the stress and struggle worth it. Winter eventually gave way to spring, as it always does in Minnesota. The snow melted, the grass greened up, and life moved on. But I never forgot the lessons learned during that blizzard, and I carried them forward in everything I did. Stand up for what's right. Document everything. Surround yourself with good people. Don't abuse power. Treat others with respect. Simple lessons, really, but apparently not everyone learned them. I was grateful that I had, and that when tested, I had held firm to them even when it was hard. That was something to be proud of, and something I would teach my future children if I was ever fortunate enough to have them. The Blake Anderson who answered that phone call during the blizzard was a successful business owner who just wanted to be left alone. The Blake Anderson who came out the other side of this ordeal was stronger, wiser, and more connected to his community. It was not the journey I would have chosen, but it was the one I got, and I made the most of it. And if Patricia Cunningham ever got out of prison and somehow ended up needing a snow removal service, well, I would probably decline that particular customer. Some lessons were hard enough to learn once. I did not need to repeat them. But for everyone else in Rochester, Minnesota, Arctic Wolf snowplow services would continue to be there every winter, prioritizing emergency facilities, treating customers fairly, and clearing snow without playing favorites. Because that was the right way to run a business and the right way to treat people. The blizzard of January 2025 taught me that, among many other things, and I would never forget it.